How's everybody doing today? Welcome back to the channel. This is Adventures with Dice, and I am Rob, your host for these videos. And today we're going to be talking about Icrpg versus Basic Fantasy. So I didn't really do a list of comparisons between these two games. I've done several videos on Icrpg and Basic Fantasy, and why I love both games. And if you look through the videos on my channel, you can find those. I don't feel like there's a need to constantly rehash that. So what do I mean when I say versus? Well, it's an idea that popped into my head yesterday, actually. And it stems from the fact that we have been running, I have one group doing Icrpg, and then I have my kids group that's been playing Basic Fantasy. That game is a Friday night game where my kids that live here, my wife, my friend Haley, they play, and my son in Korea plays on Friday nights, which is Saturday morning for him, but we all play Basic Fantasy. And that game came to an end. We were playing Ravenloft and using Basic Fantasy rules to do it, and we had a blast with it. But we ended that game, and I put my Tuesday game, which was mainly a DCC game, on hold. And I don't know that I'm coming back to that game or not. I may or may not. I'm kind of enjoying having Tuesdays off and not having quite so many games going during the week. Because I had like 3 games a week. And it gets to be a bit much. So, I don't know. I thought I'll shut that down for the holidays and, take a break. And we ended our Friday night game, so I'm taking a break from running there too. Haley has taken over, and she's running a Dark Places and Demogorgons game for us. We're all playing kids in the 80s, and we're away at summer camp. And I'm getting to play with my wife and kids for the first time. And that's been a lot of fun. So I'm enjoying that. And hopefully I can keep her running for quite a while, because I'd like to get some time in as a player. And I've talked with the kids about coming back and teaching them Icrpg. But I'm not going to lie, there's something about Basic Fantasy that always calls to me. And I've done a bunch of videos on this game, and I believe there's a playlist for it on here. If not, I'll go back and make one. But I really love Basic Fantasy, and it calls to me. It really does. And I was watching some videos yesterday on it, and I don't know, I just got to thinking, man, it'd be nice to go back and run Basic Fantasy. And then I pulled a book off the shelf, and I'm sitting and looking through the book, and I'm like, well, the beauty of Icrpg is there's so many aspects of this game that are just plug and play. So you have the initiative system, which is more of we all roll a d20, and then highest person starts it off, and it just goes around the table like a board game, which honestly I didn't think I would like until we started doing it. And when we started doing it, I realized it speeds things up. It lets players, they don't have to wonder where in the initiative order they're going and things like that. It just makes the game, it's one of many little things that make the game faster. Hanker and Fernell over at Runehammer, literally this all started from his house rules to make 5th ed faster. And it's not one big thing that just makes the game faster. It's a bunch of little changes that incrementally add speed to the game. And this is all versions of D&D and a lot of other role-playing games can get bogged down by using let's just go with D&D, whether it's the classic, actual D&D or retro clones or whatever. A lot of them use the same systems for initiative and for combat and hit points and so on and so forth. And a lot of that has changed in Icrpg, but it's all plug and play. You can take it and plug those aspects into the game that you're playing. like translating hit points to hearts for your heroes and your monsters, like translating, instead of having, excuse me, multiple target numbers in a room to worry about what's going on, you can have one target number for every room, and the players know what they need to hit to do their things, you know, whether it's casting spells, attacking, lifting gates, whatever. And it doesn't seem like much until you put all of these things together in play, and it makes the game a lot faster. Now, I'm not bashing on old school D&D. I'm not bashing on the OSR. I'm not bashing on anything. If that's the way you like to play, then, and you and your group are having fun with it, then by all means, go for it. This is really just a video from my perspective because I got to thinking about it and I was like, well, what would I change? What plugins would I use from Icrpg with Basic Fantasy? And do I have to use any plugins? No. Basic Fantasy works as is. Okay? As is. And one of the beauties of it is it's all in one book. Your monsters, your GM stuff, your treasure, your rules for dungeon exploration, wilderness exploration, character creation, everything you need is in one book. And they have lots of supplement books and adventures, but everything you need is in here. In reality, pretty much everything you need is in here. The biggest difference between the two, I guess, is this is a very DIY, so do-it-yourself system where you create a lot of stuff. It doesn't have 300 pages of monsters and spells laid out for you. A lot of it's very abstract, and it's very you get to make up a lot of your own stuff. Now, if you're the kind of game master, dungeon master, whatever, that doesn't like doing that, then this is not the game for you. It really isn't. You need a game that has been published and all of that is done for you. Now, does that mean that Icrpg is not a complete game? No, it is a complete game. But it's designed in a way that to encourage your creativity, whether it's the crafting aspect or whether it's the monster creation aspect or the room design aspect. All of that is in here, and it plays just fine out of this book, but it encourages you to make a lot of your own stuff up, to create a lot of your own content, which I love. I really do. I think that's fantastic. At the same time, I also love Basic Fantasy, and the two games couldn't be more different in the sense that this Basic Fantasy uses a lot of old school up to 3rd edition rules and game design and theory in the way it works, and I don't know, it's slower, it is, but it has that old school feel to it, and there are tons and tons of people who have converted to Basic Fantasy, and they love that it has that old school feel, even though it has some more modern sensibilities in game design, like ascending armor class as opposed to descending armor class, and you know, things like that. But my mind was blown when I read Icrpg. There were so many of these things, you know, like I said, the heart system, the movement system, the close, near, far movement system that does away with having to use grids at all. That kind of stuff just blew my mind, and as I read it, I was like, wow, why did I not do it this way all the time? And it's just one of those epiphany moments where you read something and you're like, yeah, this is the way I need to do it from now on. So I start looking at Basic Fantasy because, like I do love the book, and I'm like, okay, well, would I use any of these plugins in Basic Fantasy? Well, yeah, I'd love to use hearts because hearts make encounter design a lot easier. There's not really a big difference between a monster with 12 hit points and 14 hit points. It's very arbitrary. It's easier to do everything in blocks of 10, in my opinion, and it's less work. Oh, this monster has three hearts, so 30 hit points. Now, The effort system is also really nice. And I'm looking at all these systems and I'm going, okay, well, I could plug this in. I could plug room target numbers in. I could plug in the close, near, far movement system because I don't want to use maps. I want to use 3D terrain and stuff that I build because it looks cool on the table, and I'm an old man that likes to play with toys. So I like using that system, and I do use that system in other games. I switched to using it in DCC. I thought I was switching to using it in Dark Places and Demogorgons, but it's actually already in Dark Places and Demogorgons. We just didn't notice it because we never really use miniatures for that game. To me, it's a very narrative, mind's eye theater game, much like Call of Cthulhu is for me. But when it comes to my fantasy stuff, I generally want to have miniatures on the table and monsters. And it's not just because they look cool, it's a hobby. I enjoy painting and building all of this stuff. So, I get my rocks off on that, and I like putting it on the table and blowing my players' minds with the stuff that I've built. And it's always funny to me because sometimes I'll put stuff out and they'll be like, wow, did you make that? And I have to be like, actually, I bought that. I painted it or whatever, but it's getting to a point where they can't tell what I bought and what I actually made, so that's kind of cool. Most of what I put out is stuff I made. Because number one, I'm cheap, and number two, I love crafting, and why buy terrain and stuff that I can make myself? And I'd rather make it myself. And that way I can put my own unique touch on it. Like I've done with my Ultimate Dungeon boards. I've got a couple of videos on the Ultimate Dungeon boards that I do, which is the opposite of Ultimate Dungeon terrain that Professor Dungeon Master does. And there's nothing wrong with Ultimate Dungeon terrain. I think it's perfectly fine. I just wanted to go a little bit different route with mine. And anyway, you can go watch those videos and check it out. I've got a new one that I'm doing that is different than the other boards. I've done the dungeon board, the tower or castle circular Ultimate Dungeon terrain style board. I've done the wilderness board. And I'm about to do what I call the negative space board, which is a little hard to describe. It's going to be a black board, and I'm going to have modular stone-colored cavern pieces and walkways and stuff that I lay out on it, where the black is either pits or walls, where the negative space can be whatever I want it to be, but it just blocks everything, or it's a drop-off, whatever. But I'll do a video on that and show you how it works. Because I feel like I need some caverns, and I thought that the negative space board would be a good way to do that. Anyway, I digress. Getting back to basic fantasy, I kept thinking, okay, well, I can use from Icrpg, I can pull the initiative system, the heart system, the movement system. I can pull this system and that system. And then I stopped and I thought, well, at a certain point, it stops being basic fantasy if I do that. It literally becomes Icrpg with race class restrictions. That's it. So why bother? Why not just play Icrpg and use the game as is? So that's kind of what I decided to do for my fantasy gaming. I'm going to say in the verses, Icrpg rules-wise is beating out basic fantasy for me. Now, here's the caveat to that. If I have players, be it online, which I don't do a lot of, I need to learn more about that and do it, because I'm sure some of my viewers would get on there and play with me. But if I had an online group or another group here that was like, no, we really want to play old school style basic fantasy, I'd be more than happy to run it and not use anything from Icrpg, just use this as is. The problem that I have is I've introduced 3 of my groups, which I have some players that play in all 3, and then there's varying players that play in different groups. But anyway, I've introduced 3 of my groups to Icrpg. And as I introduce them to this, just like me, they fall in love with it. And there comes a point where they're sitting there going, why would we go back to these restrictions and these rules that make it so slow when we could play this and it's fast and heroic and over the top? And I have to agree with them. So I think it's better to play Basic Fantasy maybe with some of my friends who haven't played Icrpg or don't have an interest in it, because there is a significant price difference between the two games too. This is the second edition core paperback, which you can get on Amazon for 30 or 35 bucks. For the price of this book, which is not bad, 30 or 35 bucks is okay for a role-playing game. But for that price, I can get 6 of these in paperback. I could buy books for the entire table and just hand them out. In fact, I've done that before. I've ordered 3 or 4 or 5 of these at a time and just handed them out to players. So if you've got players that don't want to invest a bunch of money in a game, and even the hardback is like 12 bucks. You could go on there and buy the paperback versions of everything on Amazon that they have for Basic Fantasy and spend less than the cost of one WotC D&D book. So, and this isn't to bash WotC D&D, but WotC's bashing themselves. I don't have to bash them. But anyway, I don't know. I kept going back to it going, man, I really love the style of Basic Fantasy, but I can get that style, that emulate that feeling of the dungeon crawls and stuff just as easily with this, and it's faster and more exciting. So when it comes to fantasy, I'm probably going to primarily just use Icrpg. I don't know about sci-fi, because there's a lot of different sci-fi that I like. I really love the Alien game, but to me, the Alien role-playing game works best for, one-shots or one-story shots. So I don't know that it would be the perfect fit for this. I haven't really looked into it a whole lot. I love Dark Places and Demogorgons. I'm not going to convert that over to Icrpg. I use it with a couple of rules changes, but I love that as far as that's how I get my 80s kids, Stranger Things, It style, Goonies style fix. But for just Basic Fantasy, I probably won't use Basic Fantasy. I'll probably use Icrpg. I'll still reference Basic Fantasy because there's a lot of really good stuff. Prices for gear, information for designing dungeons, all kinds of stuff in here that's really good. Retainers that it doesn't go into a lot in this. So I find it good as a reference book. And if my group, any of my groups, came to me and said, hey, you know what, Icrpg is fun, but we would totally be behind playing a campaign in Basic Fantasy again, I would still run Basic Fantasy. So I'm not saying it's off the table or it's not going to get run. In fact, I'll probably still do more videos on it there. I have all the books for it, and I want to eventually get around to doing some more reviews for some of that stuff because it's really, really good. It's a really hard choice for me between these two games because they are so great. Both of them are so good. Like I said, I switched to white box for a while, and I love the white box system for fantasy. It is a little too light. White box has been used for a lot of things, like World War II Operation White Box, which is really cool. I haven't played it. I've only read some of it. The Eldritch Tales, the white box, Lovecraftian white box. I love that book. That's a fantastic book. I pull that book out and read it all the time, even when I'm not running a Cthulhu-style game. I still read up in that book just because it's such a beautiful book. It's so well made, and there's just so many ideas popping out from that. And to be honest, white box and Basic Fantasy are pretty close to interchangeable. I've interchanged stuff between the two a lot when I've been running. But, again, I'm rambling and getting off topic. So, I don't know. I know I have people that are hardcore on here in the Basic Fantasy camp, in the DCC camp, in the Icrpg camp, even in the old school, Beckme and first edition D&D stuff. Which, whatever, like I've said in my other videos, whatever game you're running that you're having fun with at the table with your players, then that's the right way to play. That's the right way to play fantasy RPGs, is to play what's fun for you. What I am finding, and the reason I'm making this video, is because I found myself in the middle of this big dilemma of like, well, I really love this and I really love this, but if I wanted to play this, I keep wanting to pull things over from this that were designed to fix certain things that are in here. Not really fix them because they're not broken, just to streamline them and make them faster. So I finally had to cut ties between the two and go, okay, well, I'm mainly going to run this, but if my players want to play this, or if I really get a hankering for a slowed down old school style game, then I will pull this out and run it. I also have tons of supplement books for old school D&D that this translates really well to. So all of that is useful if I'm running this, like the Gazetteer books. So I don't know. It's not a case to me where one is better than the other. They do the same thing, but they do it differently. And the weird thing is I like both ways. I think I like this one more, the Icrpg, but again, that may have to do with it being newer to me. Basic Fantasy is the first OSR product I got, which I heard someone the other day post that OSR stood for Obsolete Shitty Rules. And I thought that was hilarious. But I don't know, I'm at a mixed review when it comes to these two books in particular, because I really love both of them, but I think my go-to for at least the time being is going to be Icrpg, and maybe I'll end up playing so much of it that it'll kind of burn out, and I already have a craving for that old school feel, but if my players get to that point too, then I'll be like, all right, well, let's just take a break, let's do an old school campaign. And, after slogging through a few levels of an old school campaign, they'll probably be ready to jump right back into Icrpg or DCC. Either one. DCC if they like having their characters killed on a regular basis. But anyway, as far as a versus between the two, I am going to primarily be focusing on Icrpg because I really love this game. But there's still going to be content for Basic Fantasy here because I still love that game too. I know a lot of us on here have different opinions on the OSR and original D&D and newer role-playing games that are coming out. And, what are your thoughts on them? Put them in the comments below. What was I saw yesterday, Free League, who I do some reviews for them. They announced, I guess it was yesterday or the day before, they're doing with AMC the Walking Dead role-playing game. And one of my friends was like, dude, you gotta check this out. And I'm like, I don't know, man, I'm kind of over zombies. Like, once zombies became mainstream for years, they weren't really cool anymore. I just got bored with them. I quit watching that show a long time ago. So, I don't know, I mean, to people who are excited about it, that's really cool. I mean, I don't understand how it can be like a big thing that it's set in the Walking Dead universe. That's just a zombie apocalypse. You can't throw a rock in a role-playing game store or whatever and not hit 10 role-playing games that do some kind of a zombie apocalypse. Even Rifts has a zombie apocalypse book. They also have one for Chaos Earth. There's zombie apocalypse stuff everywhere. So, I don't know, I'm just kind of over the whole zombie apocalypse thing. But hey, I did put a bunch of the stuff that I've been showing off on the channel on my Patreon. I've got some of the drop-in encounters up there. I put up a bunch of files of the RPG cards that I've been doing up there. So, if you'd like to get any of that, it only costs you $1 a month to support the Patreon, and you get something out of it. Because if you're going to support the channel with $1 a month, then I want to give you stuff. So that's the easiest way to do it, is for me to create stuff and upload it, and you guys get it and take it and use it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have opinions on which game system is your favorite, it doesn't have to be one of these two, but what game system is your favorite for your go-to for fantasy gaming and why? Put it in the comments below. I love reading that kind of stuff. And until next time, my friends, good gaming and good luck.